Should you buy or should you rent? This is the real estate dilemma as old as time. However, in today's crazy housing market, it's probably more important than ever to start really asking yourself this question and figure out which one makes more sense. Because after all, housing prices are at record highs and the rents are trailing right behind those high home purchase prices. So it's becoming more critical to figure out whether or not buying or renting is the right decision for you. And by the end of this video, I want you to walk away with a confident decision in mind, or at least knowing how to make this decision the right way, so that way you won't get screwed over when it comes to the housing prices this year, and you know you're making the right decision for you. Now, there's two main things we're going to look at in this video. First of all, how much does it cost to rent versus buy a comparable home in your area, as well as how fast are the prices for rent and for sale rising in your area? Because these two factors are what you're really going to be using to gauge whether or not you should rent or own your home. Now, I want to give you an example from my own life and how I've made this decision over the years and how my decision is changing going into 2022, and I hope this will be helpful for you. Over the past 5 or 6 years, my wife and I could have bought our own place, but we decided to rent instead. And the main reason was because the gap between renting and owning was huge. We've literally been able to save roughly about $1,200 per month for the past 5 or 6 years. And that difference is basically the difference between how much we pay in rent versus how much it would cost to own a comparable property of where we live. And that decision has worked out very well for us because since we've been able to save all that money over these years, we've used that money to make other investments. We've bought investment property with it, we've bought gold and silver with that money, and the return on investment on these things has played out very nicely for us and just made us wealthier. So I don't regret the decision whatsoever to rent all these years versus buy, because the trade-off has been that we've had extra money to invest. However, now that the prices are going up so much and so fast in our area, it's becoming to be a different story. And now the gap is getting much closer to it makes more sense to buy than to rent. And this situation could be true in your area as well. So this is what we need to look at. We've been paying about $2,300 a month in rent. And to buy a comparable unit to where we live would cost about $3,400 to $3,500 per month. So you can see where that savings is coming in. We're getting to save that $1,200 a month by not paying that extra it would cost to own. However, now the rent prices are coming up closer to that $3,400, $3,500 a month range, which means that there's no gap anymore. The cost to own is basically the same as it is to rent. And so this is actually influencing our decision to become homeowners here in the building that we live in. We're actually going to be purchasing a property where we live instead of renting from now on, and this is the main reason why. So this is the first thing you want to look at in your own life. How much does it cost you to rent versus own a comparable home? This is the most critical thing when it comes to making this decision. Now, you have to keep in mind when you own a home, there are some hidden expenses that don't just add up to the regular monthly. Sure, you have your monthly fee to own the house, which you have your taxes, your mortgage, your insurance, in our case, the HOA dues as well. That stuff is standard. You're going to have that every month. But what you can't count on are surprise expenses like special assessments, for example, if you're in an HOA, or say you need a new roof, or you need some kind of expensive repair, the air conditioner goes out. There's a lot of things that can come up as a property owner that you might not be ready to pay for, and those are additional expenses that are going to add on to your monthly, of course. Versus when you're renting, you don't have to worry about that, and having that peace of mind for some people is really all that matters. However, I will tell you, from being on both sides of the aisle as a landlord and as a tenant, you don't always get your way as a tenant, okay? Just because the landlord is responsible for making repairs in your property doesn't mean they're going to do it in a timely manner that you would expect them to. So you could be living with a problem or a situation that you're not happy with for a long time until the landlord gets it right, and that can be frustrating, and you might feel like you're getting ripped off because you're paying rent and it seems like nothing's getting done. So it can all come down to how good your landlord is. I've personally experienced this myself, and it's not a fun situation to be in. So if that's a situation that you've faced before, then buying could definitely be a good decision for you besides being a good financial choice. But obviously, if you're the kind of person that, say, you need to move every couple of years, or you want to move every couple of years to keep things interesting, then buying's probably not going to be a good choice for you, simply because you move around too much and it's going to be too much of a hassle to buy and sell a property in that short time period, and chances are you could end up losing money, especially if the market takes a turn for the worse. I mean, let's face it, in this housing market, prices are at an all-time high, and if you decide to buy and sell at the wrong time, you can lose a lot of money. And that's exactly the next point I want to get into. Because prices for rent and for sale have been going up so much in the past 18 months or so, it's getting harder to decide whether or not you should buy or rent. Because on the one hand, if you keep renting, you face ever-increasing rent prices. With inflation on the rise and housing prices on the rise and repair costs on the rise, guess what? That means rents are going to be going up along with that. And you're not gaining anything by paying that extra money in rent besides a bigger hole in your pocket, let's face it. So now it could end up making more sense for you to buy versus rent. But then you're stuck in this situation of paying top dollar for a house that no one's ever paid for that property, right? However, I made a video recently about some home buyer tips that will really help you going into 2022. So if you haven't watched that video yet, go ahead and check it out. I'll leave a link for it in the description. But the biggest tip that I give in that video is you really need to know your local market. And that's the only way you're gonna know if you're making the right decision to buy or rent. Because if you're not in tune with what's happening out there for how much properties are selling for in your area, or about how much a property should be worth and what things are renting for, it's gonna be almost impossible to make the proper decision here. And going back to my own example, because I'm a real estate agent here and I know my market extremely well, I know a good deal when I see one. This has actually been the biggest factor in us deciding to switch from renting to owning, because I know the market here, a good deal came along, we jumped on it, and I know it's a good financial decision, not only from the point of view of future appreciation for the property, but also just from the monthly payment point of view, because now we're going to be virtually paying the same to own this property than we would have to pay if we were to rent a similar property. So that's where it makes a ton of sense to buy now versus rent. And because housing prices are at such an all-time high, guys, that's why it's so important to know your market. Because if you know more or less what places are selling for, and you see a property come up that is a good deal, a better price than what you would normally expect that property to be at, that's a pretty clear indicator that you should probably jump on that if you're on the fence like I have been. Because let's say you can get a property for $50,000 or even $100,000 under market value, then you're in a situation where you're going to have some immediate equity in the property day one as soon as you own it, as well as you're going to be in a situation where your payment is going to be roughly the same as it would cost to rent a similar property. And in that case, then it's really a no-brainer to own. But this, of course, assumes that you have the money for the down payment, you have the financial stability knowing that you can make that payment every month. So there are some other factors to consider if you're looking at buying, not just the monthly cost. However, if the monthly cost is very close like it is for us, then you really need to be looking at buying despite the prices being at an all-time high. Because at least you'll be locked into that monthly cost for the next 30 years. Sure, you might have some insurance increases and some property tax increases, which will add up to being more expensive monthly, but those expenses probably won't rise at the same rate that rental rates will rise in your area comparatively. And if you're renting, then you won't have anything to show for it when you leave that property. You don't have a property to sell, you get your security deposit back, and the landlord says thanks for your money after all these years, and you walk away with nothing. Versus if you were to buy that property, you would at least be able to sell it, make a decent profit hopefully when it comes time to sell, and you can use that money to reinvest in a new property somewhere else or use it for whatever you wish. Now I know that buying versus renting can be a very individual decision. It's going to vary for every single person. But just know that if you do need some help making this decision, I do offer one-on-one consulting calls I have for the past year or so, and a lot of my viewers that have done this with me have been pretty happy with the results. So if you ever want to consult with me one-on-one and try to get some help on making this decision, I do offer that service as well, and the link to that's always in the description. Now the next thing you need to do is go check out that video on the 2022 home buyer tips I made right over here, and I'll see you guys over there.